So why don't you start by telling me why you came to see me today?
Well, Doc, I can't seem to be happy.
Interesting. Interesting.
I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall. I can't seem to find happiness.
Have you considered being Danish?
Danish?
Yes. Denmark is always one of the happiest countries on earth. If you were Danish, you would be happy. I'm going to make you Danish.
Danish?
Hey y'all! As you can see, we are back in the living room, just trying to keep you guessing, and you probably missed Bowtie Deer up here. But today, as you heard, we are talking about the topic of why are Danes so damn happy? And it's funny because we got asked this question even before we moved to Denmark. Friends of ours would say, oh, you're going to love it there. I always read that Denmark is one of the happiest countries on earth.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of videos and literature and books and things like that out there talking about like why are Danes happy or what makes them happy. And we decided we're going to take our take in a little bit of an academic direction, actually. So we're going to look at happiness in Denmark in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, for those of you that don't know, this is a famous pyramid invented by American psychologist Abraham Maslow, who basically looked instead of at people who are struggling with psychological disorders or difficulties, looking at the successful people and what makes them successful. And from this, in the 1940s and 50s, he developed this hierarchy of needs, driving from basic needs to be able to survive all the way up to the pyramid's peak of self-actualization.
So, as you may have already guessed, we're going to look at this topic through the lens of Maslow's hierarchy. We'll look at it level by level and start at the bottom.
So the first level of Maslow's hierarchy are physiological needs. These are things like air, food, water, shelter, the basics that any human needs to survive. Now, I would say most developed countries in the world offer this at least to the vast majority of their citizens, but Denmark does quite well in this area here, where essentially anybody here can be essentially guaranteed these things. And going around, you certainly don't see like a large number of homeless. Certainly there may be vagrants or people who choose to be out on the streets rather than in some sort of shelter, but they still find a way to come through and they get taken care of as well if anything were to happen to them.
Yeah, I would say almost at a societal level or at a country level in Denmark, if somebody can't meet these needs for themselves, then I think everybody would agree that the government needs to step in and meet this need for the people.
Yeah, so it's the most basic level, and I think, again, it's well established here. This is something that Danes really don't have to worry about or fear about, which is one of the cores of Maslow's hierarchy, things you don't have to worry about that make you able to succeed.
Now, it's important to explain that Maslow's hierarchy basically means that you can't move up the hierarchy until you've satisfied your needs on each level below that. So, with Denmark satisfying the lowest level very easily, we move up to safety needs. And that basically means your personal safety as well as employment, property, resources, the ability to basically have more than just your basic needs met. And I think in this level, Denmark does exceptionally well. I think when it comes to most countries in the world that are industrialized and wealthy, this is something that people tend to reach, but not always the way that Denmark does. Because if you can't reach this level on your own, this is where the government, the social welfare system does come into play, and all Danes basically reach this level as well.
Yeah, so when you talk about security at a level beyond the physical one, this is certainly where the Nordic and the Danish welfare state really takes hold right here. And you can see this is a place where essentially anybody that wants a job can have a job. Anybody that wants to have enough money to survive will have enough money to survive. And so this is a place where, again, the second rung is where Danes in general don't have to have fears. They know that if something happens to them, unfortunately, there'll be something to catch them here. And so this is something where their needs will be able to be met at this safety level and they'll be able to survive.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty powerful to know that you're never going to even hit this level in your life, that you're always going to be satisfied with where you land as far as resources, property, employment, and safety especially. Denmark is one of the safest countries in the world. Copenhagen was rated this year the safest city in the world. Yeah. So it goes without saying that people have their needs met, then things become more safe, and then you can move farther up the hierarchy.
Now, as we go to the third level of Maslow's hierarchy, we start going into the psychological needs. So now our physical securities have been met. We just start going into our emotional, into our psyche that we have to take care of as well. The first one is about love and belonging. And this is one that I think is in some ways a little bit ironic because Denmark often gets a rap as being people that are a little bit cold and a little bit difficult to get to be friends with. But the irony of this actually is what makes love and belonging such a strong thing here in Denmark, because people have intimate relationships and they build them with a small circle of friends and family that they treat like family. And so what that means is that they're able to always have that sense of belonging, that sense of love in their lives in a way that sometimes, especially in the US, we may not, because we've moved away from our families. And I mean, how many stories are there about feeling completely lonely in a city like New York City with 7-8 million people? So this is something where I think the kind of intimate relationships and the kind of smallness of circles that Danes tend to keep actually makes them succeed on Maslow's hierarchy, because they're always to get that sense of belonging and that sense of love.
I also think that it transcends a little bit further into society, at the entire level of society, because family is so important and integral to Danish life. And that's not to say that some people don't have bad relationships with their family in Denmark, or that some family structures and units are not as healthy as others. It's also not to say that our family in America, if you're watching, we love you and we think that you do a great job as part of our family. But when it comes to Danish society, family is integral. It's huge. And that means that people don't keep score and clock your hours if you're leaving to go watch your kid play football or soccer, because they did the same thing when their kids were growing up. So they're not worried about what you're doing. They're worried about themselves and their family. And when all of your needs are met, you're not in that kind of petty place where you're scrapping to get ahead a little bit, or you can really worry about your family and your friends and the things that are most important to your psychological well-being.
Yeah, I think this is also where the smallness of Denmark really helps as well when we talk about belonging. When it comes down to it, there's less than 6 million Danes living here in Denmark, and so it can have a little bit of a small town feel, and I mean that in a positive sense. In that sense of belonging is that you know that you're part of something that's around you. It's familiar settings, and these are the things that really make people able to thrive at this level of the hierarchy and be able to move up beyond it, because they always feel like they belong somewhere, whether it's a societal level, a family level, a friend level. They feel like they belong, and that really helps elevate the level of happiness here.
Okay, and moving up the hierarchy, we've reached the level of esteem. And as you see, that's kind of getting closer to happiness, because we're talking about self-respect, we're talking about status, we're talking about value, and we're talking about how people care about you. And in Denmark, this is something that I think, again, happens at a societal level. Because while it is a country with norms and traditions, you're able to chart your own course. You're able to chart your own path. And whether it's school or work, you have the ability to be an individual, and you have an ability to do whatever makes you happy, as long as you're not hurting anybody else. You're going to be supported in your endeavors. That means that all work and all labor, anybody that contributes, is valued. And you don't always find that in other societies. I can say, honestly, that growing up, we would hear people say things at school, or even just parents saying things like, well, if you don't work hard, you're going to be working in construction, or you're going to be a trash person picking up the garbage. And I mean, that's so awful when you think about somebody saying that, but that was very common when we were growing up, for people to say that in the US. I don't think you would hear that kind of thing in Denmark, because people are valued for what they contribute, whatever they contribute. And that's important.
Yeah, and staying in the workplace, I think another example of this is the way that contribution is expected from people across the hierarchy of any sort of office. The kind of flat office structure is quite common in Denmark, and especially the idea that anytime a decision needs to be taken, there's going to be a meeting called, and at a minimum, you're going to have people at least be able to voice their opinions, no matter what the position is they hold in the company. And sure, the boss may take a decision in the end, but the expectation is everybody is going to be contributing to this. Everybody has an opinion that's worth being heard, and they're being held in esteem, which is the level that we have here too. I think another point that's interesting, you bring up on the point about people having the freedom to do what they want. I think within these two levels of Maslow's hierarchy, talking about the feeling like you belong in something, but also being held into esteem. I think an example of that is, say, the way that people dress, or the way that people have their clothes. Obviously, if you look at a Danish workplace, it's a whole lot of white and gray and black, and not a whole lot of color that way. But at the same time, almost everybody is covered in tattoos, and you have people that are very professional that have tattoos down their arms that are visible in professional positions. I think it's an example of how it's that combination of belonging and feeling like we're sure you conform a little bit with a national uniform of a white shirt and some dark slacks, but at the same time you're an individual by having your own tattoos or maybe having a unique haircut or something like that. Again, being able to find your version of freedom that also gives you that comfort to find your own personal joy.
So you're absolutely right. Whether you have pink hair and piercings and an armful of tattoos, you're judged not on what you look like, but you're really judged on what you contribute and what you do. But you would think esteem may be as far as we go, but there's one other level of Maslow's hierarchy that I think most Danes excel at. So let's learn about that.
So the last level, the peak of the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy, is self-actualization. And this is the concept that you are able to become the best version of you that you can be. And this probably is the absolute paragon of happiness. I mean, if you find this sort of nirvana, you've reached the peak, and this is absolutely what happiness is. And I think this is something that suits Denmark quite well. I mean, this is a country where, when I think back of multiple times in jobs, they've talked about finding the sweet spot of needing to find the mix of business need, personal interest, and personal skill. As a society, this is something that Denmark excels at, where people don't go in to be doctors because they want to get a really high salary. They do it because they want to treat patients and they want to do medicine. So they can feel self-actualized in that they're doing something that they're passionate about that contributes to society and is also something that they want to do and is something that they're really good at. Being able to find that sweet spot is really how we self-actualize here in Denmark in the workplace.
Yeah, and I think it's not even just in the workplace, it's also in the journey to what your career ends up being, or if you end up changing your career. So if you take a little time and you zig and zag, you're not looked down on if you decide in your 40s or 50s that you want to go back and get a degree in something unrelated to what you studied and have been working in. If you decide you want to pursue a different passion or a different field, you're really celebrated for that, and that would not be the case in the U.S. where we come from, and I don't know that there's a lot of countries that could say that.
No, I think another example of that in society is Denmark's often looked at for its pretty high divorce rate. But I think that's actually a reflection of self-actualization where you don't have this, say, societal pressure to stay in relationships that aren't healthy, that if you're unhappy, that you should get divorced. You should be able to move on and find your own personal happiness. And it's done in a way that's positive, where we see all the time where people get together with their exes for holidays, something that you would almost never do in the U.S. People co-parent quite well generally in the country. I've heard from multiple people that I work with or we're friends with are able to navigate that pretty well. It's a good example of how you can find happiness in relationships and not have societal pressure just to keep some sort of construct going, even though it's not suiting either of the two of you.
And I think part of that in divorce and recovering from it is that you don't have all of those things to fight over that may happen in the U.S., like money, who's going to take care of what, who's responsible for the kid's education or this or that. A lot of those stressors are taken off of the situation. So people aren't staying in marriages as a necessity because of financial reasons. Even healthcare keeps people in bad marriages in the U.S., and that just wouldn't happen here.
No.
So because there's so much support at the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy, people are able to reach self-actualization in a way that isn't possible in the U.S.
Yeah. And I think with the low levels as well, an example too, with having that sort of economic security, being able to do jobs that you like to do, means that people do have a little bit more free time. And so one of the other cores of self-actualization is finding creative outlets. And almost everybody that we know in Denmark, whether it's coworkers, friends, everybody has some sort of often pretty intense hobby that they're a part of, or clubs and associations that they're in. And this is part of people being able to find a creative outlet. You're more than just the 36 and a half hours that you put in at the workplace every week. It's what other clubs and sports and activities that you do that really have you find that level of creativity that really helps you find self-fulfillment even beyond just your job.
So I think this is a good place to wrap things up. And I would say that my takeaway from looking at Denmark through the lens of Maslow's hierarchy is that people are happy in Denmark because they're allowed to be happy. A lot of those stressors and a lot of those basic needs, and not even basic needs, a lot of the complex needs of society are met for people in Denmark. So it enables them the chance to thrive in a way that they wouldn't be able to without the support of those around them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other key one is we look at the psychological needs, especially in the US, people talk a lot about freedom. Having the freedom to be yourself is incredibly powerful, and being able to, but also being able to do that inside a construct that makes you feel like you're still loved and protected and part of something bigger, that you belong somewhere. I think that tension is something that sometimes is difficult to understand, but has really opened my eyes, I think our eyes both, having lived here in Denmark. You can have that tension between being a little bit conformist, but also having a little bit of more freedom to be who you are and what you want to do.
Yeah, I think the key difference is that there's a level playing field when it comes to reaching self-actualization, that in Denmark, you have the ability to really go out and be supported. And I don't just mean emotionally by your family, I mean by the state and in ways for your education and training. And if there's accidents along the way, you're supported to make sure that you can follow your dreams and follow your passions. I think there's a reason why the best architects in the world are from Denmark. The best restaurateurs in the world are from Denmark. I think it's because people are able to follow their passion. And at a young age, these are probably people that loved cooking or baking or drawing or building houses with Legos. And again, Danish. But I think that's because people are free to follow their passions while being themselves, while having all of their basic needs met.
Agreed. So that's our take on happiness in Denmark. Make sure that you leave your comments below so that we can learn from you. I'm sure there's other opinions that you want to share with us. While you're on there, make sure that you like and subscribe so when new videos come out, you know that you can go see them right away. Thanks for watching with us. Bye, guys.